lot going on, some big announcements coming out today from the President of the United States, from the President of Russia. We have warnings of potential threats of escalation of war. We also have declarations of war. There's a lot going on today, October the 2nd, 2025. Let's go ahead and dive in. We got a lot to cover. Get you caught up on the latest. I'm going to put the articles on the screen, read right from them. They're going to be cited down below. Let's go ahead and take a look here. As you can see, coming out today, October the 2nd, Russia issues a brutal response to U.S. after Pete Hegseth's prepare for war warning. We're going to get into the discussion. He had a speech today and addressed a lot of things. Russia-Ukraine war, the latest. Putin warns Trump of escalation if U.S. gives Kiev Tomahawk missiles. And again, he addressed this in the speech that was a couple of hours ago today. Putin making a big announcement. Now also, Russia's Vladimir Putin mocks the recent drone incursions. NATO warns this is war. And he came out and he basically said, okay, I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to send drones out anymore. I'll stop. France, Poland, whoever you claim is doing this. And he mocked them. And they said, this is war. Putin just outright mocking the NATO nations. Now, take a look at this. He also said Russia is not in a Cold War, but a fiery conflict with the West, Moscow says. He says that what is going on right now, this is not a secret war or a Cold War. This is all-out fire war. And he said things are just going to escalate. So right now, talks for peace and negotiations are off of the table. We're hearing that things are going all in further into war. And we've heard that the United States has said they're going to be giving Ukraine intel. 4 strikes deep inside of Russia, according to reports. So not only are they going to be providing Tomahawk missiles, which will be able to reach Ukraine, and we're going to be, reach Moscow. We're going to be looking at the maps as to how far these Tomahawk missiles can go, why Russia is so concerned about this. But also the United States is saying, we're going to let you know exactly where you need to hit Russia as well. Now, Russia has come out and warned an appropriate response if the U.S. sends Tomahawks to Ukraine. And make no mistake, this is a warning directly to the United States. And take a look at this. Just a couple of hours ago, Donald Trump has announced he has declared the U.S. is now in an armed conflict. We are at war with the Caribbean cartels. So while things are ramping up with Russia, Ukraine, NATO, potential World War III, we have already declared that we are at war in the Caribbean with the drug cartels, with Venezuela and all these other nations. Things are ramping up significantly left and right. It appears that there is conflict on the horizon of the United States right in the middle of it. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into the articles. I've got video footage as well. Let's go ahead and start off with Trump's declaration that we are in an armed conflict as of today in the Caribbean with what's taking place. He said we're at a war within, but we've also got a war without, with Russia, NATO, Ukraine. We're going to be covering it all because a lot unfolding today, October the 2nd, 2025. So like I said, I'm going to reference these articles, put it on the screen, read right from it. They're all cited down below. I try to hold myself accountable to the community so you know where everything's coming from. You can see the sources, the dates. If you appreciate that, do me a quick favor. Hit that thumbs up like button before we dive in. Just takes a second, helps out the channel a ton while we're live, spreads it across the YouTube platform. In addition to that, subscribe to stay up to date. It is totally free. Why not? I will keep you up to speed as the news rolls out. And also, if you missed my updates on Social Security earlier today, you're gonna want to check it out. Some historic things happening with Medicare, and there's concerns right now about the announcements that are coming for Social Security with the government shutdown that we are currently in. So if you missed that, check it out right after this. But let's go ahead and dive into the latest. We're going to start off with what is going on with Trump's announcement. Let's do some video footage, and then we're going to get into the details of escalation with Russia, the United States, Ukraine, NATO, and what Putin had to say, just outright mocking the United States and NATO. Let's go ahead and dive right in and take a look.
Breaking moments ago, the Trump administration says it is now engaged in, quote, armed conflict with drug cartels. That's according to a memo to Congress that was obtained by Fox News. Our Peter Ducey has got more on the breaking news live from the White House. Peter, I assume this is in response to the criticisms that have been leveled at the president for taking out those drug boats.
Yes, and John, those criticisms come from Democratic lawmakers who say they are concerned that these cartel members, cartel drug boat captains, are not getting due process before a bomb drops on their head. President Trump and his team do not seem moved one bit by that, and so they drafted this memo making this official to Congress. Part of it says, based upon the cumulative effects of these hostile acts against the citizens and interests of the United States and friendly foreign nations, the president is determined that the United States is in a non-international armed conflict with these designated terrorist organizations. The president directed the Department of War to conduct operations against them pursuant to the law of armed conflict. And the president just talked about this week.
If you try to poison our people, we will blow you out of existence, because that's the only language they really understand. That's why you don't see any more boats on the ocean. You don't see any boats. Around Venezuela, there's nothing.
And it's not just Venezuela. The president's team is putting out the word that cartels throughout the Caribbean are now on notice.
We in the UN Security Council just took action yesterday on the gangs that have taken over Haiti right off Florida's shores. These gangs are in coordination with all of these transnational groups. They're shipping drugs, money, weapons. They're destabilizing the entire region.
This is a president, of course, Donald Trump, who emphasizes his desire to keep the United States out of new wars. This memo seems like a legal designation so that they can keep dropping bombs, no U.S. troops involved on the ground. John.
So they have been designated foreign terrorist organizations, same as ISIS, same as Al-Qaeda. Obama was taking out ISIS leaders with drones, so is this any different?
Not on paper. And I remember on January 20th, when President Trump was naming these cartels terrorist organizations, I asked him if that meant that he was going to start ordering special forces raids across the border or in places in South America. And he said that stranger things have happened. Things have been happening, John.
They certainly have. No question about that. Peter Deuce.
There you have it, you guys. So that was just a little while ago, a couple hours ago. Donald Trump said that we are in an official armed conflict in the Caribbean, and things escalating significantly with Russia as well. So we're going to be taking a look at Russia here in just a second, but let's go ahead and take a look at this article coming out today. War on drugs. Trump declares the U.S. is now in an armed conflict with the Caribbean cartels, and it just seems like on various fronts right now, the United States has just got a lot going on. Let's go ahead and take a look at this so you can see it for yourself and know exactly what is taking place here. Now, this article says that the United States is formally engaged in an armed conflict with drug cartels that Donald Trump's administration has labeled unlawful combatants, according to a confidential notice to members of Congress. An unclassified notice obtained by The Independent was delivered to congressional national security committees this week. The New York Times first reported the statements. Now, the designation appears to claim extraordinary wartime powers to justify a series of strikes against alleged drug traffickers in the Caribbean Sea, which have drawn legal scrutiny and allegations that the administration and defense officials committed extrajudicial murder. The administration has previously stated that the presidentially directed strikes were performed in defense of national security and are fully consistent with the law of armed conflict, arguing that the lethal force was permitted against targets allegedly smuggling drugs for cartels designated foreign terrorist organizations. According to the notice, the administration says that the president has determined that cartels are non-state armed groups whose actions constitute an armed attack against the United States and are now engaged in a non-international armed conflict or war with a non-state actor. So essentially coming just short of announcing that the United States is at war in this conflict, but he said we are in an armed conflict with a non-state actor. Now, the administration cites a statute requiring reports to lawmakers about conflicts involving U.S. military personnel. A White House official told The Independent that the administration is complying with requirements under the National Defense Authorization Act to inform Congress of any attack involving armed forces. The report was first issued to Congress September 15th and does not convey any new information, the official said. The president directed these actions consistent with his responsibility to protect Americans and the United States' interests abroad and in furtherance of United States national security and foreign policy interests, pursuant to his constitutional authority as Commander-in-Chief and Chief Executive to conduct foreign relations, the notice says. Now, following news of the notice to Congress, White House Deputy Press Secretary Ann Kelly told The Independent that the president acted in line with the law of armed conflict to protect our country from those trying to bring deadly poison to our shores, and he is delivering on his promise to take on the cartels and eliminate these national security threats from murdering more Americans. Now, at least 17 people were killed in targeted strikes on vessels in the Caribbean in recent weeks. On September 2nd, Trump announced on Truth Social that military assets killed Tren de Aragua's narco-terrorists who were operating under the control of Nicolas Maduro, Venezuela's president, to smuggle drugs into the United States. Now, the strike killed 11 people on board, Trump said. Authorities in Venezuela have said that those killed in the attacks were not connected to the Tren de Araguas gang, which the Trump administration has labeled a foreign terrorist group whose members should be summarily deported from the country. Now, Trump announced a second strike September 15th against another vessel allegedly carrying narcotics, killing 3 terrorists on board, he said. He announced a third strike September 19th, claiming that intelligence confirmed the vessel was trafficking illicit narcotics and transiting along a known narco-trafficking passage en route to poison Americans. At least 3 people were killed, according to the president. Now, based upon the cumulative effects of these hostile acts against the citizens and interests of the United States and friendly foreign nations, the president determined that the United States is in non-international armed conflict with these designated terrorist organizations, according to the administration's notice to Congress. Defense officials have been ordered to conduct operations against them pursuant to the law of armed conflict, the notice says. The United States has now reached a critical point where we must use force in self-defense and defense of others against the ongoing attacks by designated terrorist organizations, according to the notice. Now, it remains unclear what evidence the United States has collected to justify the attacks. The White House and defense officials have declined to share additional information about the strikes, citing national security concerns. Legal experts and former national security officials have disputed the president's legal authority to launch extrajudicial killings against suspected drug traffickers, raising consequential questions on both the administration's growing conflict with Venezuela and the president's anti-immigration agenda. In January, Trump issued an executive order designating Tren de Araguas as a foreign terrorist organization, paving the way for his order invoking the Alien Enemies Act to summarily deport suspects, gang members. Now, neither the Alien Enemies Act nor foreign terrorist organizations designations allow for lethal force. Deploying lethal force on suspicion of illegal activity violates the letter and spirit of more than a century of international standards and the United States' own regulation for maritime operations against civilian vessels in international waters, according to the Washington Office on Latin America and Human Rights Advocacy Organization. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you support Donald Trump hitting these vessels that they're saying bringing in drugs from the cartels from Venezuela and the Caribbean into the United States? Or do you think, no, this is crossing the line, this is not acceptable? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because according to this article, they're saying that there are some that feel that this is crossing the line. If you support what Donald Trump is doing, drop a 47 in the comments for support for the Trump administration. If you don't support it, drop a 46 for support for the previous administration. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But now let's go ahead and switch gears into what is now the conflict that is escalating today between the United States and Russia. We're going to be getting into the video footage and the articles. And do me a favor, as I mentioned before, if you appreciate the updates, please take a second, hit that thumbs up like button, subscribe to stay up to date, and look at those 47s pouring in. As you're dropping those 47s, if you haven't done so yet, click that thumbs up like button. Let's take a look at some video footage covering what is unfolding right now with the United States and Russia getting into a direct conflict. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the video footage.
The White House is reportedly planning to provide Ukraine with intelligence to carry out missile strikes deep inside Russia. That would be a significant escalation, right, Senator?
Well, look, if you think about a football analogy, How many times could a football team win if they only had their defense on the field? You've got to have your offense on the field. Vladimir Putin is not responding to any of the peace talks. He is not negotiating good faith. Putin understands one thing, and that's force. He respects strength. Ukraine war will only come to an end when Ukraine's in a position of strength. As you see, Putin has only escalated the tempo of this war following the Alaska meetings with President Trump. And so I think it is an appropriate option to put on the table. That'll be up to the Ukrainians to decide if they want to exercise it, but they need to have all the force needed to bring an end to this war.
Senator Steve Daines, always a pleasure, and thank you very much for joining us this morning, sir.
Welcome back. Increasing aggression from Russia and its latest drone attack on Kyiv hitting its energy infrastructure, which led to a blackout at a nearby Chernobyl nuclear plant. Ukrainian President Zelensky accusing Russia of posing a threat now to global security. Denmark, meanwhile, warning that the Kremlin is waging a hybrid war on Europe as European leaders are gathering to discuss Russia's increased drone incursions over NATO allies, including the Danish capital, Poland, Romania, and Estonia. The EU also weighing the transfer of hundreds of billions of dollars in frozen Russian money. They want that transferred to Ukraine, which Moscow is now describing as theft. I raised the issue with European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde recently. Watch. Can you demand that $300 billion in Russian money does not get back to Putin and you use that to rebuild Ukraine?
So far what we've done is make sure that that money stays frozen and is not disposed of by Russia. The proceeds of that money, the interest, if you will, generated by the principal that is sitting there, is used in order to reimburse the loans granted by the EU and the US. My hope, my strong hope, is that as much of that money as possible is used in the negotiations and that all of it is used to reconstruct Ukraine.
But
this is not my decision.
Right.
I'm just the president of the central bank.
Well, you are among the most influential voices in Europe, if not the most economically influential voice in Europe. So shouldn't you be able to say this money will not get back to Russia? Mm-hmm. What about sanctions? Would sanctions on Russia work?
Maria, you're right to establish a link between the sanctions and the freezing of that of those funds. And the sanctions have to be imposed and have to be constantly renewed and reinforced if necessary in order to force people to the negotiation table and to extract a peace agreement. But all I can do is give my views to the leaders of Europe in order for them to make the decisions.
Joining me now is the Heritage Foundation Vice President of National Security, Victoria Coates. Victoria, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. I want to get your take on this spiking aggression from Russia. I mean, drones, and even if they weren't armed drones, into Poland, Romania, Estonia. How do you view this?
Well, good morning, Maria. Good to be with you. I think it's not a coincidence that this kind of aggression really ramped up after Putin got back from Beijing last month. And so I think what you see here is a concerted effort between China and Russia to keep the United States and Europe engaged in Ukraine, distracted, perhaps you might say, by Ukraine. And I thought that was very interesting what Christine Lagarde was saying about the frozen Russian assets. I mean, it is high time for Europe to get after this. They are working on their 19th package of sanctions. We're looking at the 4th anniversary of this war next February. They have to take stronger action. What they've done so far hasn't worked. And so, yes, she can make her recommendations to European leaders, but those leaders need to act on the recommendations. And this is the leverage that will bring Putin to the table and bring an end to this horrible war.
So do you want to see NATO allies respond? Because I spoke with the president of Poland just the other day here in studio, and we talked about the $300 billion in money, but we also talked about his assessment of drones coming into Polish airspace by Russia. Watch this.
Texas homeowners, if you could get backup batteries for your home from your power company at no extra cost.
Poland shot down Russian drones after Russia's airspace violation. How many drones have you witnessed, and what is your reaction to this?
We are talking about 21 drones. I have no doubt that this action had been planned by the Russian Federation. Surely this was not a mistake. Our eastern border is under the migratory pressure, so we are in the midst of a hybrid war. The Baltic Sea, which joins a couple of European countries, is a place where there are regular provocations carried out by the Russian side. Now we witnessed the violation of our airspace, so we can say that this is a regular testing of Poland's defensive capabilities and of the whole of NATO.
Now, as President Nawrocki, do you want to see NATO allies respond to this, Victoria?
Well, certainly, as the president said, if Russia violates NATO airspace, it is absolutely in our rights to shoot down those drones or those planes, whatever it may be. And he was very clear about that. That is not an act of aggression on our part. That is a defensive act on the part of NATO to prevent Russia from escalating this situation. And I think we're also seeing here, Maria, a divide between what my old boss, Don Rumsfeld, would have called old Europe and new Europe. New Europe, like Poland, is taking the necessary steps to cut themselves off from Russian energy, to defend their borders. They're very, very firm on their sovereignty. But old Europe is consuming more Russian energy than ever. In 2024, they imported more than they ever have before. And they like to point the finger and say, oh, it's Slovakia and Hungary. I'm sorry, those countries aren't big enough to consume the quantities of Russian energy that Europe continues to lap up. And yes, it's cheap. And yes, they say they need it to run their industrial base. But they've got to get off of that energy. And then, that is what is going to squeeze Europe and squeeze Russia rather, and make Europe stronger. So that, I think, is the very powerful message the president had last week at the United Nations to challenge Europe to stand up and actually bring Russia to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact that Europeans are still buying Russian oil, but they'll say, look, this is a global market, where, we don't know that we're doing it directly. But you're right. I mean, President Trump has spoken about this so many times. Let me move on to Israel, because it is pushing forward with its full force offensive in Gaza, asking residents to leave the area. Meanwhile, leaders are awaiting a response from Hamas on President Trump's 20-point peace plan, which, of course, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agreed to at the White House on Monday. Victoria, what's your reaction here? Do you think that Hamas is going to give us an answer soon? And if not, the president said he supports Israel finishing the job.
We've got that going on as well. So we've got the conflict with Venezuela. We also have what's going on with Gaza, and then also with Russia and Ukraine. Man, and also Leon Smith, thank you for the $20 super chat. I appreciate the generosity. Said that we need to pray right now. Pray for everything that's going on. If you agree, drop a praying hands in the comments if you're a praying individual and you believe that prayer works. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of these articles so that way you can see exactly what is going on, as we're hearing that Russia has issued a brutal response to Pete Hegseth's saying prepare for war. And he also said FAFO. And if you know what that means, drop it in the comments. But right now, let's take a look at Russia's response to this. All right, so I'm going to jump to this one right here because it's got a whole lot more details from the Independent than that last one. And it says, Ukraine-Russia war latest. Putin warns Trump of escalation if the United States gives Kiev those Tomahawk missiles. And you're going to be seeing here in a second that map that is going to depict how far those Tomahawk missiles can go and why it is that Russia is so concerned about this. And in addition to that, the United States said they're also going to be providing Ukraine with intel on where exactly to hit. Susie Float, thank you so much for that $10 super chat. Appreciate that a ton. Let's take a look at this article here that says Vladimir Putin has warned Donald Trump that if he provides Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles, it would be a new stage of escalation. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance said on Sunday that Washington was considering a Ukrainian request to obtain long-range Tomahawks that could reach targets deep into Russia, including Moscow. Speaking on Thursday at the Vivaldi Discussion Club, a forum of Russia experts, and that is where a lot of this came out today. I actually saw the video footage, no American outlets that I can share with you. They're foreign news media outlets, so I can't play them here on YouTube. But it says, in the city of Sochi, Putin said, using Tomahawks without the direct participation of American military personnel is impossible. This would mark a completely new, qualitatively new stage of escalation, including in relations between Russia and the United States. So again, this is not between Ukraine, NATO. This is Russia warning the U.S. This is direct potential conflict with the United States. Now it says it comes as the U.S. is set to provide Ukraine with the intelligence to carry out these long-range strikes on energy infrastructure targets inside of Russia, according to reports. So not only would the United States be handing over these Tomahawk missiles that could reach deep into Moscow, but also giving them the information to say, oh, if you strike here, you'll hit this particular specific location that will knock out infrastructure, energy. Now, Washington has long been sharing intelligence with Kiev, but has not openly declared its involvement in striking Russian energy targets. This new development would make it easier for Ukraine to hit infrastructure such as refineries, pipelines, power plants, with the aim of depriving the Kremlin of revenue and oil, the Wall Street Journal reported on Wednesday. Responding to the reports, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the United States of America transmits intelligence to Ukraine on a regular basis. So there you have it, you guys. We are hearing that that is unfolding right now. And he had that speech today, a couple of hours ago. And in foreign news media outlets, it's coming out as tomorrow, October the 3rd. They're reporting on the things that Putin had to say. Very aggressive in that speech. And you can even see here he mocked them. Said, oh, you're concerned about drones going into your airspace? He said, I've decided I don't want to do it anymore. I'll stop. Mocking them. And NATO responding back saying this is war. Let's go ahead and take a look at this here. Russian President Vladimir Putin has mocked NATO nations' claims of Russian drone incursions into their airspace. I don't want to do it anymore. To France, Denmark, Copenhagen, Lisbon, wherever they could reach, Putin joked as he addressed the forum of foreign policy experts in Russia's Black Sea resort of Sochi. Putin described the most recent accusations of Russian drone flights over Denmark as a part of NATO's efforts to inflame tensions to boost the defense spending. At least 10 European countries, including Poland, Germany, and France, they have accused Russia of flying drones into their territories in recent months, while the European Union has launched a drone wall initiative to bolster its eastern flank. Meanwhile, European leaders, they are sounding the alarm over escalating Russian provocations across the Baltic region. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk declared this is war on Thursday, today, as he urged NATO to abandon illusions of and confront what he called a new type of war. The remarks came during a high-level summit in Copenhagen focused on bolstering continental defense amid a wave of suspected sabotage and drone activity. And let me know your thoughts. Are we in war, or are we heading to war? If so, drop a WW3 in the comments, because they're saying this is exactly what this war is going to equate to. Various nations of NATO. And you can see here today, as I mentioned, several big announcements coming out today. Donald Trump announcing that the United States is in an armed conflict with drug cartels in the Caribbean, basically coming short of saying we are at war. NATO, you can see right here, the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk says we are at war with Russia. And also we're hearing Russia saying, United States, this is a warning to you. If you give Ukraine those Tomahawk missiles and that information of where to strike us, you're going to escalate this and we're likely going to war. A lot of big announcements coming out today, October the 2nd, 2025. Reading on, it says the remarks came during a high-level summit in Copenhagen focused on bolstering continental defense amid a wave of suspected sabotage and drone activity. Now, here's what to know. Tusk said Poland shot down Russian drones violating its airspace in early September. He warned that incidents near Polish infrastructure, including ports and pipelines, are happening almost every single day. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen called the situation a hybrid war, targeting NATO allies. German forces raided the Russian vessel Skanlark, uncovering evidence of drone launches and sabotages. Oh, wow, I did not see that. This is the first time I'm reading this. Germany is saying that their forces raided a Russian vessel, Skanlark, and they uncovered evidence of the drone launches and the sabotages taking place on that vessel. So Germany now saying they have hard evidence that these drones and these things, they are coming from Russia. Russia claiming that it is a false flag event by NATO, but Germany claiming they now have evidence. French commandos arrested crew members of the suspected Shadow Fleet tanker Boroquet in Saint-Nazaire. Polish authorities detained a GRU suspect accused of burying explosive-packed cans in Lodz Cemetery. Drone disruptions in Denmark, Norway, and Germany remain under investigation, with Russia as the prime suspect. And in fact, we've heard they've invoked Article 4 of NATO, which means that they are discussing right now, do we need to go to conflict with an opposing force that is threatening NATO, aka Russia? Now, Russia denies all allegations and claims. It does not seek conflict with Europe, it claims. Tusk emphasizes Ukraine's role in a broader conflict. If Ukraine loses, it will mean our defeat, Tusk said of Poland, as this is what we've heard from Zelensky all this time. He has said that if Ukraine loses, they are just phase one in what it is that Russia is hoping to accomplish. Up next, it could be it could be Poland, it could be Latvia, it could be Estonia, it could be Romania, it could be any of those nations up next. Ukraine is saying they need to hang in there and they need the support of NATO. Now, take a look at this. Russia, as we mentioned, is saying that this is not a Cold War. This is a fiery conflict with the West, Moscow says. The war in Ukraine, Europe's deadliest since World War II, has sparked the biggest confrontation between Russia and the West since 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, this article coming out today says Russia on Thursday today, and as I mentioned, it was a big speech by Putin. He said a lot of things. He condemned the United States, condemned NATO, mocked NATO, talked about where we're going to be going from here. Let's take a look at this. Russia on Thursday said that there is no Cold War with the West because it was now a fiery conflict, and that the European Union and the NATO military alliance were lying about Moscow's alleged sabotage operations to justify vast military spending. The war in Ukraine, Europe's deadliest since World War II, has sparked the biggest confrontation between Russia and the West since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, I would disagree with the comparison with the Cold War. Russian Foreign Minister spokesperson Maria Zakharova told reporters when asked if there was now a new Cold War with an iron curtain like drone wall being built in Europe. We are already in another form of conflict. There has been no cold here for a long time. There is already fire here, she said. Maria, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. She says, God bless you, Steve. I appreciate that. God bless you, Maria. And thank you for that super chat. I'll continue to keep you up to date here on the channel. Reading on, it says, peace looking forward away in Europe, looking further away in Europe. And as I mentioned to you, we're hearing that it just appears that things are escalating. In fact, Russia, Vladimir Putin said that war, it appears, is the only path forward. There are no peace talks underway right now, no ceasefire agreements. Nobody's at the negotiating table. We're just hoping things don't escalate into all-out war and World War III. Less than 2 months since U.S. President Donald Trump met Vladimir Putin at a summit in Alaska, peace looks even further away, with Russian forces advancing in Ukraine, Russian drones allegedly flying in NATO airspace, and now Washington talking about direct participation in striking deep into the world's biggest nuclear power. The United States getting involved right in the middle of this and receiving those threats from Russia. Zakharova, when asked about European accusations that Russia has intruded into NATO airspace, carried out sabotage operations, and hacked key installations, said that the unfounded accusations showed that the EU and NATO were preparing provocations against Moscow. So Russia claiming they've done nothing of the sort, and these are all false flag narratives by NATO and the EU. All their statements indicate, first, that they are preparing a chain of provocations. Second, that they need to justify their military budget, Zakharova said. Former U.S. President Joe Biden, Western European leaders, and Ukraine cast the Ukraine war as an imperial-style land grab and have repeatedly vowed to defeat Russian forces. President Vladimir Putin portrays the war as a watershed moment in Moscow's relations with the West, which he says humiliated Russia after the 1991 fall of the Soviet Union by enlarging NATO and encroaching on what he considers Moscow's sphere of influence, including Ukraine and Georgia. So right now we're hearing that that is what Vladimir Putin is hoping to do. He's trying to get those other nations that he feels have been lost as a result of history, and now he wants to reunify them. He is saying, in fact, I shared with you articles yesterday. He came out in another speech and said, this is a righteous war. This is a righteous battle that we will not lose and we will not stop until we regain various territories within Ukraine, 4 of them. And once those are accomplished, then we will move forward and there could be talks for peace. But until then, he said, there will be no peace. Now, let's take a look at this. Now, a lot of the conflict directly between Russia and the United States is coming because of those Tomahawk missiles that the United States has said they're planning to give to Ukraine. And we actually saw Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, he actually came out and he said, the moment we get those, Russia, we're going to be using them, so you might want to go find your bomb shelters. To which we saw Russia respond back and say, just keep in mind the fact that Russia has bombs that bomb shelters won't protect you against. And also, they said, United States, American citizens, you might want to take that into consideration as well. So a lot of back and forth rhetoric of escalation, potential war. Let's take a look at this so you can see exactly what is going on coming out today, October the 2nd, 2025. Now, this article reads, the U.S. will provide intelligence to Ukraine for long-range missile strikes inside Russia targeting its energy infrastructure, it has been reported. Now, citing unnamed officials, the Wall Street Journal said that President Donald Trump had allowed the Pentagon and intelligence agencies to help Kiev attack the sites that generated revenue for Vladimir Putin's war machine. Newsweek has contacted the White House and the Kremlin for comments. Now, here's why it matters. The United States has been sharing intelligence with Kiev for a long time, but the Wall Street Journal reported, carried by other outlets, suggests that Washington wants to make it easier for Kiev to hit energy sites that are integral to Russia's economy. Now, the U.S. has said that it was weighing up providing Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, which could be part of the new commitment by the Trump administration to help Kiev. Ukraine's strikes deep inside Russia on oil facilities have caused gasoline shortages across the country that pose a political problem for Putin. So we're hearing right now that they could be handing those over and it could be a serious issue. Now, do you think that we should do this? If you think so, put yes in the comments if you think that the United States should hand over those Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. If you think no, put no. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, if you haven't done so yet, I see we got over almost 5,000 people live with me. Please take a second. We just need, looks like 10 more likes to get 1,700 while we're live. If we get half the room to hit the like button, helps out the live stream while we are on. Reading on, it says, U.S. officials cited by the Wall Street Journal said Washington may provide Ukraine with intelligence to target refineries, pipelines, power stations, and other infrastructure far from its borders and asked NATO allies to provide similar support. Reuters confirmed the report, citing 2 unnamed U.S. officials. Greg Aspie, thank you so much for the $50 super chat. Appreciate your generosity. He says, we are currently in the last days. Babylon the Great will fall in 1 hour. All the merchants of the world will see her smoke ascend and cry, Babylon, Babylon has fallen. It all must happen because the only thing God can't do is lie. Amen to that. And thank you, Greg, for that $50 super chat. I appreciate your generosity a ton. I will continue to keep you up to date on whatever unfolds. Now, reading on, it says, this approval for additional intelligence to Ukraine preceded Trump's post on Truth Social last week, saying that Ukraine could retake all of its land occupied by Russia, according to the paper. Vice President J.D. Vance said Washington was considering a Ukrainian request to obtain Tomahawks, which have a range of 1,550 miles, therefore putting most of the European Russia easily within range, a prospect that has rattled Kremlin propagandists on Russia state TV, because Ukraine is now saying, we've got the missiles to hit Moscow directly. It comes amid reports that Ukrainian missiles and drone attacks on Russia infrastructure had disrupted nearly 40% of the country's oil refining capacity as motorists across the country face gasoline shortages. Since August, Ukraine has targeted at least 16 of Russia's 38 oil refineries, the Financial Times reported, and Russian diesel exports are at their lowest level since 2020. Lines at gas stations are annoying motorists, but the fuel shortages also pose a problem for Russian military and agricultural sectors, Berlin-based energy analyst Thomas O'Donnell said to Newsweek. And I've seen the video footage. Let me know if you've seen it on X. Lines and lines of cars waiting to try to get gas right now in Russia because of what is taking place. This is because, as well as affecting Russia's ability to produce war materials, military vehicles are heavily reliant on diesel, and the regions near the front line are among the areas most affected by this shortage. Also, Ukraine's first major drone campaign 2 years ago caused a diesel shortage in Russia, which hurt farmers harvesting their crops, a problem that becomes more marked in the coming weeks with a knock-on effect on grain exports, O'Donnell said. So here's what people are saying. An unnamed U.S. official told the Wall Street Journal that we are awaiting written guidance from the White House before sharing the necessary intelligence. So we are one step away from them receiving the intelligence and those tomahawks, which Russia would have said had equate to the United States being at war with Russia. Republican Representative Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania said on X, "Peace through strength means giving Ukraine the tools to win. Providing intelligence for long-range strikes is a critical game changer that will help Ukraine defend its sovereignty, end Putin's bloody war, and secure freedom's victory over tyranny." Here's what happens next. Kiev will be eagerly awaiting confirmation of U.S. provisions of Tomahawk missiles, and if Washington provides the intelligence for long-range strikes, Ukraine will likely to continue its attacks on Russian energy infrastructure if no ceasefire is forthcoming. And again, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Should the United States do this? Should we hand over Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine? If you think so, put yes in the comments. If you think no, put no. Let me know your thoughts. And if you haven't done so yet, hit that like button. Let's take a look at this article. More on the response that came out from Russia. And you're going to be able to see that map in this one coming up here as to what is going on with these missiles for Ukraine. Now, this article reads, Russia will respond appropriately if the U.S. transfers Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine. The Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told Russian journalists on October 2nd today. So again, this is a warning to the United States. We will respond appropriately to what you do here, giving Ukraine this information and these weapons. His remarks come just days after U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance said Washington is considering Kiev's request for Tomahawks, which can strike targets at ranges of up to 1,600 kilometers or 1,000 miles. Peskov did not elaborate on what the measures Moscow might take. Speaking at the Vivaldi Forum on October 2nd, today, Russian President Vladimir Putin dismissed the significance of possible U.S. transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Tomahawks are powerful weapons. They are no longer quite that modern, but they are powerful and pose a threat. Of course, they will not change the battlefield situation at all, Putin said. President Volodymyr Zelensky reportedly pressed U.S. President Donald Trump for the missiles during a closed-door meeting on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly on September 23rd. The long-range missiles have been on Ukraine's wish list for years and were included in Zelensky's victory plan presented to then U.S. President Joe Biden in October of 2024. The Tomahawk is a key component of the U.S. arsenal. It can fly at low altitudes, perform evasive maneuvers, and be reprogrammed during mid-flight. Ukraine argues that weapons would allow strikes on command centers and supply hubs deep behind the front line, with Zelensky saying centers of power, including the Kremlin, could be legitimate targets. Now, I still see people saying, yes, they believe that we should go ahead and provide Ukraine with these missiles. Let's take a look here now at how they extend the reach. You can see in purple, Tomahawks. We go 1,600 to 2,500 kilometers. You can see that they are reaching way far out, way past Moscow. So they have the ability to reach out more than even necessary. You can also see here in the yellow, the ATACMS. And with the ATACMS, it doesn't look like they can quite reach Moscow. We've got the Storm Shadows, and then they've got the short GMLRs. And you can see the extent of their reach from the Ukrainian borders. So those Tomahawks, they're saying, are a game changer. And that is why this is such a serious issue coming up right now with the United States providing this to Ukraine. However, Vladimir Putin coming out and saying, doesn't matter. It's old technology. We will be fine. Now, reading on, it says, Ukraine now relies on Western-supplied Storm Shadow missiles with a 250-kilometer range. Russia maintains a significant advantage over Ukraine in missile capabilities, regularly using Kalibr cruise missiles and Iskander ballistic missiles to strike Ukrainian cities. Ukraine has turned to long-range drone strikes to compensate, targeting Russian fuel depots, military bases, and infrastructure far from the battlefield. The debate over Tomahawks also comes as Trump's administration begins sending weapons to Kiev under a NATO-backed deal. The first aid package approved September 16th included Patriot and HIMARS missiles. So there it is, you guys. Let me know your thoughts. Take a look at this here, how far those Tomahawks can go. Again, I ask, should the United States provide this to Ukraine? If you think so, put yes. If you think no, put no. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But as you can see, a lot happening today. Back and forth, we're hearing that Donald Trump has said that we are officially in an armed conflict right now in the Caribbean with the drug cartels. He said we're essentially just coming short of announcing that we are at war with them right now, with those Caribbean drug cartels, Venezuela, with all those things going on. And also we had Vladimir Putin coming out, mocking NATO, giving major warnings to the United States. And we saw that Pete Hegseth came out and said, prepare for war. And to our adversaries, FAFO, which many of you already know means if you're going to mess around, you're going to find out who the United States is. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are we going to be going to war? Or are we going to be able to stave this off? Are we going to have peace? Let me know in the comments your thoughts. Put war or peace. Also, if you haven't done so yet, hit that like button. And as always, like I said, all these articles, they are going to be linked in the description. I cite all the sources, put it on the screen, read right from it so you can know and rest assured this is the latest. You can see the dates. You can see where they're coming from. If you appreciate that, hit that like button. I see we got quite a bit of people in. We only need about 25 more likes to get 2,200 likes while we're live. Helps out the channel. Subscribe to stay up to date. It's totally free. Why not? And I will keep you up to speed on everything. So regardless of whether we have war or peace, I will let you know here on the channel as soon as we find out, get you the latest updated information. But that is it, you guys. And I see people pouring war into the comments saying it is already here. World War III. We will see. I will keep you up to date and let you know every step of the way. But thank you so much for joining me. Take care. God bless.